Hey everyone, it's Isaiah. Welcome, welcome. This is another one of Isaiah's Inspiring Evenings podcast episodes. And this is actually episode 5 of a series that I'm doing with the amazing Ree Pearson. Hi, Ree. And we are exploring relationships red flags. It's a 9 episode series, and we are discussing the not so very happy behaviors, red flag behaviors, how we can see them, how we can understand them, and maybe how we can interrupt patterns before they escalate into harm. These conversations happen live and they are then shared in my podcast and anywhere else the guest, aka Ree, feels like sharing. Before we go too much into this episode, let me introduce Ree once again. So, Ree Pearson lives overlooking the sea and describes herself as being on the edge. A police officer for 27 years with focus on policy and how the police deal with partner abuse, Ree specializes in domestic abuse, stalking, and safeguarding. Her post-policing career has continued with directorships with several community interest companies, all focused on those specialisms. Ree's book, Be Kind, No Excuses, is a guide for teenagers and parents to raise awareness of the red flag behaviors that are a precursor to abusive behaviors in relationships. Her mission is to flip the discussions on violence against women and girls and talk about the real problem, the majority of abuse being perpetrated by men who are violent towards others, women, men, and children. Be Kind, No Excuses is now a community interest company, and Ree is also the co-creator of Wow Women Only Wellness Ltd, who the aim of which is to create safe spaces for women and girls to come together and step into their own power through learning that self-care is not selfish. This episode is episode 5, as I was saying, and it is titled Control and Surveillance. And we are trying to get to know how some entering into the relationship and getting to know the other person might well be a red flag. So that would be my first question. How do you recognize somebody who is just red flag with wearing a red flag as opposed to somebody who just is trying to get to know you because you're new in this relationship?
That's the problem because you don't know who is going to be that person. And it's about being aware that they potentially are. And as we've
Mm,
discussed, you don't go into, I think what happens now is people go into a relationship really quickly.
mm-hmm,
Now, when you start dating somebody, the um the Italian nobility in medieval times would tell their women, you don't know somebody until you've known him for 500 days. Now I've met people who
mm-hmm.
moved in with people after 2 weeks,
Mm-hmm.
three
Moved in,
weeks,
had a
4 weeks,
child, got a
had a
divorce
child
in less than 500 days.
less than 500 days. Exactly that. And one of the problem that we have is we want to have a relationship with this person when you start dating them.
Mm,
And the problem you have then is if that person is an abusive person, they want the relationship to move quickly. They want you in it quickly. They want that connection. They want that control. They want that quick. Speed is an indicator
mm,
of
yeah. Mm,
potential abuse. Now, we're always going to have people, and this happens all the time. I met my husband and I knew within a couple of weeks, and we've been married for 40 years.
of
Now,
course.
that's lovely, fantastic, wonderful. That's great for you. But the majority of people, I mean, my daughter has been with her partner for nearly as long as I've been with my husband. So I've been with my husband 16 years, and my daughter's been with her partner just under 16 years, and they've been
Mm-hmm.
together since they were 14. And that's unusual.
Mm,
And they're
yeah.
happy, but it's unusual. And they didn't live together because they were 14. Do you know what I mean? They didn't
Hmm.
live together till after they actually both went to different universities, lived in different countries from each other,
Hmm.
and then eventually, after they'd done their masters, they then moved in together. So they had
Hmm.
actually been together. How old are you when you finish your masters? 22, 23? They'd been together
Something
nearly
like that.
10
Yeah.
years.
Hmm.
So that wasn't fast. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
I lived
Hmm.
I was in a relationship. I was dating my husband for 3 years. I lived with him for 3 years, and then we got married. And even then, Isaiah, I sometimes look at him and I just think, why did I do that?
I've been
If
married.
I'm having a row
Ooh,
and you swear in Greek, like you said, you swear at him in Greek, I swear at my husband in English, sometimes in Spanish because he doesn't understand that. And it's like, and I see a red flag and I'm like, how did I not see that? You know what I mean? And that's like years in. But seriously, how you don't know when you meet somebody because your ambition for the relationship is positive,
yeah,
and
of
that's
course,
something that an abusive person can play on. Nobody thinks that they're getting into a relationship with an abusive person.
of course.
And this is why we're doing what we do,
Mm,
why we're talking about what we're
mm.
talking about, just so people can have that awareness. So people don't, some people do, I think, walk around with a red flag on the top of their head, like a Kylie Minogue feather, you know. And I just
Mhm.
think, how did you not see that? It's like bloody
Yeah.
blatant. And
Mhm.
within 15 minutes, you say something or you do something and you just think, how did you not see that? My God. And that's the point, isn't it? We know
Yeah,
it.
but that's also, I think, very, very much easier to see on in somebody else's relationship rather than in your own. Um,
Mm, I guess. Yeah. I mean, in the book, the Be Kind No Excuses book, with in the first story, lady number one, I think 30 minutes. And
mm,
then
mm,
I was listening to a podcast about a lady who ended up with a guy whose life, as he presented it to her, was actually all fake.
yeah.
And I was listening to the podcast. She was on a podcast. This is Colleen. She was on a podcast with oh gosh. Anyway, famous person from anyway, she got the podcast, and I started listening to it, and within 2 minutes of the podcast, I was like, there it is. There's the red
Mm,
flag, and
mm,
it was immediate. But she wouldn't know that.
mm.
And that's why we
Yeah.
talk about making sure we have our boundaries in place. And like people are like, what boundaries?
Mm.
Um, make sure that you know that somebody wanting to move the relationship forward quickly is a red
I
flag.
think
It
that,
doesn't
if we talk
necessarily
about,
mean that they're an abusive person. It just means like be aware that
mm,
potentially that is a red flag.
that, things that it's not even abusive when you talk about control. I mean, for me, one of the things that I was very, very aware was how much are we mingling our lives, like bank accounts, living together, all those things, what is the speed where these things get mingled? And I'm
Yeah.
like, I remember my mom, when I was very, very young, saying, you do not enter a relationship with anyone if you don't have your own income. Do not put yourself under somebody else's income. It's like, no. She was, feminist of the 1970s, the
Good
one
for your
burning their
mum.
bras. And and I think that, it made, for me, it was like a feminist thing. But now if I look at it from the what's an abuser thing, it's also same here. Because when you have your money and your own income, or you could just leave
Yes.
very early
And
on.
that's really interesting that you brought up the finance to
Yeah.
me. One of
I
the
think
things for years, I mean, I think it was 1976 in the UK before a woman could have a bank account, a credit card.
1974 in France.
Okay. Yeah. So not, I mean, I was alive then. I
Me
can
too.
remember 1974.
Hmm.
I
Yeah.
know what I was doing.
Yeah.
Like, that's not that long ago. So
Mm.
when you when you meet somebody and they, well, like, we're going to have children and you're going to reduce your hours at work and you're going to become financially dependent on that other person.
Mhm.
And for some people, that's fine. But for me, that's a red flag. And it's something that you should be aware of. I always say this, you must always keep your pension contributions at 100%.
Mm.
Don't
Yeah.
reduce your
Mm.
pension contributions, because down the line, when you retire, you have a smaller pension.
Mm.
But if you have a bigger pension and you're still together, woo,
Mm-hmm.
fantastic. But if you have a bigger pension and you're not together, you're solid. It's
Mm-hmm.
fine.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And it's financial things are really important. And I'm in the UK, and a person, a British person, would rather tell you that they had been arrested for a sex offence than tell you that they're overdrawn at the bank, because the Brits do not talk about money
Mm.
at all. It's a taboo subject, and so
Mm.
many people
Yeah.
don't
It's
know.
not. It's not
Bank account,
very.
how much does your husband earn? I don't
Mm.
know. What do you
Mm.
mean you don't know?
Mm.
Why do you not know? So
Mm-hmm.
not only are you dependent on him financially, as are your children, but
Mm-hmm.
you don't even know what that is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then I know somebody who had a
What
partner
drives me cuckoo is that, my grandparents in Switzerland, this was the situation. We don't talk about money. He's the sole earner and she is completely dependent. He used to give her pocket money to buy
yeah, my
food,
dad used to
basically,
do that with my
you know.
mum. Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, this is the 1940s, 50s, 60s, but this is 20 freaking 26. And I just can't believe that women are not just aware that my money is my money and your money is your money. And if we decide
Yeah,
to mix it up, it has to be a choice. And yeah,
exactly.
exactly. We at this minute we have with my husband, we've been married 37 years. Yeah, I know.
Congratulations, probably.
And we still have our own bank accounts, and then we have a
Yeah.
joint account. And
Yeah.
at the beginning of the month, we put something in the
Yeah.
joint account according to how much money we make, blah blah blah. But um, but I feel very safe that was something would happen to him. I'm solid,
Yeah, absolutely. And you
and
have to
and
be. You have to be, because if you end up dependent on somebody who is deliberately controlling
yeah,
and
mm,
on a power trip and wants
mm,
you like that, you're knackered, aren't you? Because they
mm,
can walk
mm,
away.
yeah,
They can
mm,
walk away, leave you with the kids. You're then claiming maintenance from them that they don't want to pay. I
mm,
know a lady who had a relationship with this guy who she used to take him to work and drop him off.
mm.
And he would go into the building, and then she would pick him up in the evening, and he didn't have a job there. He didn't have
Cool.
a job.
Nice. Fucking
It's
asshole.
amazing.
Sorry.
I was like, that's a really good one. That's a really
Mhm.
good one. But if you remember, I don't know if you've seen a film, is it like, oh God, I can't remember what the film's called now. It was about men who like did, oh, there were strippers. Anyway, there was the factory, and
Yeah,
they
the
got
full
laid off.
Monty.
Oh, Monty, yeah. And the guy who was the manager pretended that he still had a job. Can you
Yeah,
remember?
I remember that. Hmm.
And she
Hmm.
and then his wife was like totally oblivious to what was going on.
Hmm.
The poor guy was at the end of his tether. But you've got to, for me personally, I quite like honesty in my relationships,
Yeah, I'd rather too.
and trust and respect. They're really like really high up there on
And
my
also,
these are things I
if
need to
if
have.
we're talking about having a real relationship with someone, when they go through hell and lose their
Yeah,
jobs, etc., etc., how can I help if I don't know?
if you don't know, if you
So,
don't know,
um,
but also like living that deception is,
mhm,
you know.
yeah,
So
and
yeah,
you
it's
know, we were
interesting.
talking about
The financial
the
side of things is every single person I have spoken to who's come out of who's survived a relationship with an abusive man
mm,
talks about financial abuse post
of
separation.
course. Mm.
100%. 100%.
Of
Not
course.
just
And it's sometimes
occasionally.
it's even in
Yeah.
France, at least it's even in the law. For instance, if you were, I was at some point married to the same guy, but he was a businessman. He had a business, right? And I was his helper in the business. That was my official legal status, was um, married helper, literally.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that meant no pension.
No pension. No
And
status. No
I
ownership.
literally I went to when we created the business with him as a business person and me as the married helper. I said, what the fuck? And they said, oh, you can pay for your own pension if you want to. And I said, yeah, of course we are going to
Yeah,
pay for my pension. Because what the
yeah,
fuck, I'm not getting
yeah,
a salary because he's the
yeah,
business person. I am going to get a pension. But the
yeah,
law in France, it's
yeah,
not compulsory.
yeah,
It's okay. And you guessed it. Any farmer, for instance, the business belongs to, you guessed it, the man.
yeah. That's
So,
nonsense, isn't
even
it?
in the
Yeah,
law, it's organized. So I'm not saying that all farmers are abusers, obviously not. But if, anyone,
yeah,
um, it makes it so much easier, doesn't
yeah.
it?
And
Uh,
also, if you're married here in England at least, um, if you're not married, you don't have any rights
mhm,
in terms of money. So if anything happens, this is what happened with um my police pension. My husband married me for my money, right? And I know this, but we were happily living together. But at the time, the police pension was set up so that if you died and you weren't married, your pension would die with you.
mhm,
So all the years you put in, it would just stop. It would just disappear.
yeah. Mm,
But if you died as a married person, that person continues, that other person who survives you
would get your
gets
pension.
50% of that
Mm-hmm.
pension. So we got married, like I got I got married, I turned 50 and I retired all in the same month. It was a busy month. So we got
Yeah.
married first. And then I retired. So and I know a lot of police officers. One of my friends did this. She has two children. They have been together like 40 years. They got married just a couple of weeks before she retired
Mm,
from the police.
yeah.
Otherwise, he wouldn't, if anything happened to her, he wouldn't get any
Yeah.
money, the kids
Mm,
wouldn't get any money. And it just makes sense that it doesn't go to the registrar. We're
yeah.
married now. Thank you very much, please. Do you
Hmm.
know what I mean?
But on the
That's
whole, marriage is in France as well, in Switzerland as well. It is the cell, as a microorganism that society will recognize. The
yeah,
thing is that if you enter a marriage without your boundaries in place, financial,
yeah,
emotional, etc.,
yeah, yeah.
then you're open to be abused, basically.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
Well, any marriage, but in terms of financial stability, being married is better than not being married. But because you've discussed finances, you
mm,
must have a more honest, open, and respectful
mm,
relationship. Otherwise, you wouldn't marry. You see all these guys, they're getting all, they're getting whatever they want, whatever they've got their kids, or
mm,
their partner, basically is a maid, and then he walks
mm,
away, and she's got, well, for
yeah.
nothing. The house
Mhm,
is his.
mm,
Everything they own it. She doesn't own. He owns.
mm.
So be mindful of finances.
Yeah, and there is no way to not see that money is control.
Oh
It
yeah,
is. It is
absolutely.
such a,
And,
it's
and when
such a
you look
huge part of controlling other people.
when you look at women who are subjected to abuse, whatever that is, because obviously my focus in my world is on on girls and young women. They don't achieve in education because the biggest percentage of abuse happens to teenagers. So 20% of teenagers have already been in a relationship with an abusive person. That's
Yeah,
bigger than
every time
it,
you say that number, I have to breathe. Really, it's
it's
like,
it's
oh fuck.
absolutely no, and now you've got to remember that those teenagers are not necessarily being abused by other teenagers because controlling men
Of course.
target more vulnerable younger women
Yeah,
because
of
they're
course.
easier to
Mm,
control because they don't
yeah,
you know at 16 I didn't know anywhere near what I knew at 26.
of course. Let alone at 36
So
or
men,
46.
older men will go for younger women because it's easier.
Yeah.
And
And
even
financially,
children,
they
you see
have
this.
no income.
Yeah.
If you
Well,
manage to get her pregnant, Bingo.
Well,
You know,
it happens, isn't it? So many very young mothers whose baby daddy is a man in his 20s, 30s, sometimes older. Nobody talks about that because, it's a bit icky. But yeah, so my target audience, is that's the right term, are teenage girls, because you're not going to achieve what you could have achieved in education, in employment,
yeah,
in
of course.
in your dreams, in your, in your housing, you know,
Capabilities even,
of
because you're,
population who are in a relationship with abusive men
and
is
that's 20 freaking
ridiculous.
percent. So
Can you
that's a
imagine that you've
lot.
got a woman out there who has has the brain to get us to Mars?
Mm.
Yeah, but she's
Tough
not going
luck.
to happen because
Mm,
she's never going to go to university and she's never going to work at NASA.
mm,
We'll have to wait for
mm,
another brain to come along. That brain could possibly have already gone and missed. We're missing a massive opportunities
mm,
for people
mm,
because of this tolerance to abuse that we seem to have.
mm. And control. Uh,
Yeah,
Now, we need to address also the other topic, because the control is one, but the surveillance you
yeah,
mentioned also as the titles of this episode, and I want to go in there for a while. So, surveillance is, if I understand it correctly, but you're going to help me out here, is about when the person you're supposedly having a relationship with is rather your warden rather than your actual
yeah,
partner.
yeah. And I think when you first start dating somebody, their appearance to you is they're very interested in you. Um, and and that's what you like when you first start dating somebody. You want to know about them, you want to learn about them. But if that person is going to go on to abuse you, that is not interest, that is intelligence gathering.
Mm,
And they find out about you to use that information down the line. And the surveillance side of it is because of the control, absolutely, where you are, what you do, um, on your messages all of the time. One of the things, obviously, the mobile phone is a gift, but it's also an absolute mill round the neck because people message and they expect a message straight away. And I'm going to say this: if you're the kind of person who thinks that when you send a message, that other person should reply immediately, you need
mm.
counselling.
Can you
You
repeat that? Because it just broke
need
up.
you need to have some counselling because
Mm.
I have messages that are sitting, and it's not rude of me to not respond to a message at 9 p.m. I will wait until the next day, unless it's my kids or my husband or my sister. I'm not replying to that
Well,
message.
actually, even if it's my freaking children who seem to have a tendency to write to me at 10 p.m. with
Yeah,
non-urgent stuff, and I'm
yeah.
like, no, I'm in
Well,
bed. I'm not going to deal with
well,
where
that's
is your
yeah,
certificate of you having, TOEFL or whatever. And I'm like, it's 10
yeah,
freaking p.m. And
yeah.
no, I'm not. And even sometimes it's 3 p.m. in the afternoon and I'm at
And you're
work
gonna,
and I
yeah,
get a message from you and I just don't answer it because
yeah,
I'm doing something different. This
yeah.
idea, but this is me getting old, I think, but this idea that my train of thought, my day can be interrupted by anyone, and I need to be answering. Otherwise, I'm A, rude, B, not caring, or, or dead, basically, or dead, because people think, I've had people actually phone me after their message was left unanswered and saying, "What's up with you?" And I'm like, I have a life. I'm sorry.
Yeah. We better wait. Yeah.
But I
You,
know that
yeah.
teenagers have this um, urgency or this kind of, but not all of them
Instant
though.
gratification, dopamine.
I'm not sure because my son is the person I can message on Monday, and if I get an answer by Friday, I'm happy.
Yeah, yeah,
So,
yeah,
and
yeah, yeah,
it is
yeah.
it's very annoying to me, but I respect that because I demand the same respect that my life
And
is.
that's his choice. That's his boundary.
Yeah,
I will
exactly.
respond when I am ready to respond.
Hmm.
But what I'm saying is, if you're the kind of person who expects a response immediately,
Hmm.
you need some counseling. You need,
Yeah, I
because
agree.
I tell you what used to happen, right? I used to get a piece of paper and a pen. I used to write a letter, right? Put it in an envelope, address it, go to the post office, buy a stamp. It used to go in the post, and then it used to wing itself off to wherever it was going. And then the person got it at the other end
Mm.
a couple of days later, and then they would read it, and then they would reply, and eventually they would respond, and that letter would come winging back. And that's when you
Yeah.
had your questions answered.
And then
Not
sometimes
like now.
people would write letters without having an answer.
Yeah.
Just, they
Well,
would write every day,
I write
not
letters.
answering. They would
Yeah,
just give
I
something to
write.
this
I
person
write
for
letters
free.
to people just because I like writing letters and I love receiving letters.
Mm, mm,
But when I get a letter, I don't think, oh, I have to reply immediately.
mm, mm.
I will reply when I have something to tell.
I don't know if I said that already in this podcast, but when I was a child, my parents were, let's say, poor. Well, they've made a decision to be hippies, so it's not poor like we
Deliberately
were not
poverty stricken.
poor. It was a chosen thing, and we didn't have a phone at all at home up until I was something like 11. Let me remind you, we lived in France. My grandparents lived, half of them in Greece and the other half in Switzerland. Once a month, once a month, we went to the post office and called each set of grandparents for three
Yeah,
minutes because it was so freaking
so
expensive.
expensive. Yeah,
And
yeah,
we'd
yeah,
get and give the news for the freaking month. And that was it.
yeah,
And no, during the rest of the month, no one would panic. No one would think that, somebody died or because we didn't give any news. No, we didn't give any news. And we just have this belief, faith that no news meant good news, basically. And that was like, and that was it. We
yeah.
actually once got a telegraph or
Mm,
a telegram that somebody had died. So bad
yeah.
news, travel fast always.
Yeah.
Real bad news. But the rest, the little accidents of life, the little shit, we didn't know. They didn't know, and that was, it seems we all have survived. Well, they died now, but
Yeah,
they're,
yeah,
they
yeah.
were very old when they did.
Status.
And it's like, I'm not saying, oh, this was the good times and now it's shit times. I'm just saying we have grown dependent on having news at every moment. And I feel that too myself with my kids or my mother, etc., etc. But it is actually wrong. Wrong as in not a good idea for my mental health to be
Yeah,
depending on be reassured every minute that everybody's alive and doing well.
yeah,
That's
yeah.
unhealthy,
It is.
and I really, with my husband, we don't communicate. Basically, I'm when I leave on a holiday, I say, well, I'll call you at some point when I need picking up from the airport or something of the sort, and that's fine. Nobody, literally, we don't worry, and
No.
that's such a, I would highly recommend it to just.
Yeah, honestly, I think you should live in separate houses and then just, get together when you're happy to get together. You know what I mean? But my husband's
But
gone
yeah, but
away for work. He's gone
if we
away
bring
next
it
week.
back, to the teenagers, I just want to, I remember how I would have felt, even if I didn't at the time, by somebody who pretends to be being worried about me. I want to know
Yeah.
where you are at all times because
Mm,
I'm
yeah,
worried about you. And I can understand from the teenage me how it could feel like a good idea, but it's
yeah.
actually not. It's actually not because I can't breathe in that.
Yeah,
Even, from
exactly.
day one,
So,
I can't
you're
breathe
out,
in that.
you're out with
Uh,
your friends. Say you're out with your friends, you've gone to the cinema, you're 15. You
mm,
come out of the cinema and the guy that you're dating is outside.
mm,
And he's like, oh, what are you doing here? And he says, well, I knew you were at the cinema. I've come to walk you home because I want to keep you safe.
mm,
Well, is that
mm,
what it is? Is that on the face of it? That's really nice. That's really nice. But actually, is he there because he wants to keep you safe? And safe from who,
mm, mhm.
first of all? But is he there because he wants to make sure that you are with the people that you said you were with
Also, does he
and not
not
with somebody
trust
else?
that you are big
Yeah,
enough
it
to
doesn't
take care
because
of yourself, to be safe?
on
Because
on
that
the on the
organizes also
face
the
of it,
idea that,
it looks very
yeah,
caring, but it's the beginning of controlling because he's making sure where you are with the people that you say you're with,
mm,
and then he doesn't trust that you will
and
have plans in place to get you home.
yeah,
That you're
so
so stupid.
you're not treated like a proper
Yeah,
person that is
yeah,
capable of taking care of herself, are you?
yeah,
Um,
exactly.
yeah,
So it's
surveillance.
those
Yeah.
subtle little things, things like, oh, where are you? Show me where you are.
Mm,
I'm
hmm
I'm I'm on the beach with my mates. Show me where you are. Now, fair enough. Seems fair enough. But is he not just checking up on you?
mm,
But it's a combination of these things, like one off, fine, maybe. But when this is constant,
mm,
always messaging you when he knows that you're with your friends,
mm.
with my friends, this is where I am. Stop messaging. But if
Mm,
he constantly
yeah. Mm,
messages, that's not okay.
mm,
You're busy, you're doing stuff. Why does this person need to be responded to when he knows that you are at school
mm,
or at work or wherever it is you are? Why they know where you are?
mm.
Why are they messaging you
And even
when
if
they
they
know that you're
don't,
at school or at work? It's
and
just
even if they don't know where you are,
yeah,
you're allowed to be not available and not explaining, justifying
exactly.
your
And yet,
mere existence.
at 15 years old, the only person who needs to know where you are is your mum or dad.
Yeah, makes sense.
The
Mm,
person who's the main carer, because
mm,
nobody else needs to know where you are all of the time.
mm,
And if they tell you otherwise, if they say, "Oh, it's because I love you so much," and I just need reassurance that, I know where you are if you need me. No, my mum
mm.
knows where I am. And if you're just a kid, the thing is, it's like older man, isn't it? Older man going out with 15-year-old girl. He might have a car.
That's what I was
That's
going
why
to say.
that's why she goes out with somebody older because he's got a car. The 15-year-old in the class, he doesn't have a car. He's boring. He's only 15. So she goes out with somebody older who's more
Mm,
controlling
mm. Of
and
course.
has a bit of
But
money. So he can buy you the mobile phone. He can buy your phone. Your parents want you to have this crappy one,
mm,
I don't know, an Apple 16 or whatever. It must be up to like 37 now. I have no idea. But he'll buy
really.
you the top end, the brand new
Mm,
phone. And it's all
mhm,
about possession, isn't it?
mm,
He's got possession of you because he's bought you a phone, so you're his girlfriend now,
mm,
and you owe him.
hmm
You
Yeah,
owe him.
there's also this idea. My son is pointing that out recently, that the difference of age in the couples that are shown to us from Hollywood, basically. Um,
Yeah,
so the young woman and the older man, and this idea that, in fact, the abusive personality starts with insecurity, because basically, why should this beautiful young woman be in love with me, this older guy? So I need to control and make sure that she doesn't go elsewhere.
you're
So
looking
that's
at somebody else.
insecurity on their part.
Absolutely. Well, that's what it
But
is, isn't it?
mhm,
It's a lack.
but
It's a lack of self-worth.
yeah,
But
but
if
then
you
the
don't,
crazy thing is that how they manage to turn it against you and make you feel insecure, that
yeah. Well, it's all
and
about that
also
reflecting, isn't it? It's
mm,
that reflecting when they say something that's derogatory. What
mm,
they're saying is that's what they feel about
mm,
themselves.
mm,
Or when
yeah,
they accuse you of
which is
something,
not an
that's
excuse, by the way, it's just an
no, no,
explanation.
no. And
Let's just
when they accuse you of cheating on them,
mm,
it's because in circumstances they would or are
mm,
cheating.
mm, mm,
So, for example, you go away for work, you've got a works event, you've got to go, you've got to stay in a hotel or whatever. And he's like crazy, he's going mad. He's like, "Oh, you're going to shag the boss or whatever." That's because in his head, that's what he would do.
mm,
Because he's telling you what his standard is.
mm,
His
yeah,
standard is
mm,
if I go on a work trip, and looking to shag somebody and be unfaithful.
Besides, we're going to go back to basics here and remind everyone and ourselves that love is not control and that control is not love. That's it, and um, jealousy is not love, and fear of losing the other person is not love. That love is supposedly loving the person means you want the best for her, you want her, and I'm going to go for her, her to be happy and to be doing whatever she wants to do to make her work succeed or her studies succeed or etc etc. Controlling is not love, and we have, I think, to really kind of keep reminding ourselves and everyone of that anyone who says I want you to, that's not love. I want you to fill in the blank, that's not love. That's the beginning of an abusive, controlling relationship. Because if you enter that, what the fuck? You don't want
Or
anything from me. You don't
if
want, you
if only you would, blah blah blah, fill in the blank.
yeah, no.
Look what you made me do.
Yeah. Mm.
Yeah.
Oh gosh, we said we keep this one short, so I think we're going to an end. But yeah, look out for that, for all those little bits and pieces that signal control, that are show up as care and are in fact surveillance. And I love your. I think we're going to end with you repeating, or me repeating your thing, which is at some point, it's not being interested in you, it's gathering intelligence.
Yeah.
And that is really frightening, and it should be frightening. It
Yeah.
should be frightening. This is the part where young girls and women should be really weary about, did you say weary or conscious about this checking out that the person is not gathering intelligence, that it's
Yeah.
real interest.
Yeah. It's
Uh,
not fake intimacy.
mhm. Besides, you don't need to share all of yourself with any other person at any given time. This is
Oh, there
not
are
what a
things about me
relationship
that my
is.
husband doesn't know.
Yeah, this
There's
is
things
not
that he
what a
doesn't know about
relationship
me. Nor
is,
should he.
Mm.
Nor should he.
We should share everything. Not always.
No, don't do that.
Not always. Secrets are good.
Definitely,
Fun
definitely don't
secrets.
do that.
No. So that, after 10 years or so, you can
Yeah.
say, oh, by the way, and I'm a Harry Potter fan. And the other one goes, what? You know, I've got a box that is labeled HP and has all my
Oh,
Harry Potter fan things, but I'm not showing them off. Anyway,
okay, now I know. Now I know.
now you know, and the rest of the people listening to this podcast, but not my husband because he doesn't speak English very good, and he's not listening to us right now. So, um, consciousness and awareness, that's what can help you out um, and see these control and surveillance
Yeah,
attitudes.
yeah.
And the advice, I guess, is if you see them, run.
Run away.
Yeah,
Run away.
get the other way. Yeah, yeah.
Because it's really difficult to leave once you're involved.
And also, there are many, many lovely people who would like to love you, really.
Yeah, really.
He's not
Yeah,
the only one. I can guarantee you that the
absolutely. Yeah,
asshole
yeah.
that is going to turn into an abuser is not the only one.
100%.
Thank you very much, Ree, for another
Thank you.
fun, fun, let's not say fun, but good episode. And we have another few ones coming. So if you haven't listened to the previous ones, go and listen to them. If you haven't, and then wait for the next ones. You will find Ree's coordinates and every place where you can get to know Ree and buy the book. Read the book, share it with your daughters, any nieces around, any young girls around, and parents of young girls. You will find all this information below the video or audio where this is being shared. Thank you so much, and I will talk to you soon, both to you, Ree, and to our listeners. Bye for now.
Thank you.